Hey, good people. Welcome back to Cancer and Comedy. This is the podcast where we like to talk about facing adversity, particularly cancer and things of that nature, with hope and humor. My name is Dr. Brad Miller, and my co-host is Deb Creer, and together we like to reflect on both the challenging parts of being a cancer survivor and some of the good things in terms of how there's a lighter side of things, and we call it looking at things with hope and humor. And today we're talking with Ryan McCormick. He's a comedian, and he's known on stage as the Nutty Irishman. You can find his website is nutty-irishman.com. And he's been making audiences laugh for 30 years. He and I are a bit of contemporaries a little bit, and we're also from the same hometown of Indianapolis. But he has also dealt with a cancer diagnosis in his life, and he's been able to really deal with some of his most honest material in his comedy act, dealing with his cancer circumstances. So let's get into it. Ryan, welcome to our conversation today, my friend.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, awesome. It's good to have you with us. And I know you're out in Sacramento, California area now, but you're originally from Indianapolis, which is where I live. And so we've got roots in this same community. So it's good to talk to another Hoosier here, or at least former Hoosier. So that's good.
Once a Hoosier, always a Hoosier.
There you go. And there we go. Good to have you with us. But today you have a corporate career, but you also have a career as a comedian. And so give us just a little nugget of how that happened. How you had kind of a corporate career, and then you've been doing professional comedy for a while too. Give us a little nuggets about the intersection of those two worlds.
Yeah, I was graduated from Ball State University in August of 1988, and always had an interest in comedy. Did a couple of shows up at Ball State, and I started open mic night at Crackers Comedy Club in Indianapolis in September of '88. And then I was hosting open mic night, and my first paid week was April of 1989. And then in June, I started at the corporate end of things. I was working as a telemarketer for a consulting engineering firm. And a friend of mine and I would go to the club every week, and I'd meet all these comics. And I realized fairly early on that lifestyle wasn't really going to be for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just decided to do both, to work kind of 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then do comedy as I could.
But you've been a professional in both fields for 30 years or whatever, more than 30 years. And so you've had that kind of thing going on. And really, as I've learned more about the field of comedy, what you do is pretty common, really. A lot of people do something along this line. They have some sort of a career outside of comedy, and there's I don't know what the percentages would be, but a select few who can really make it work, traveling the country and what have you. But way to go. But it's not like you've had a lot of fun with it. Have you had some fun with it over the years?
It's just been a lot of fun. I've met and worked with some really great comedians. I've traveled the Midwest quite a bit. I was actually able to do a show in Las Vegas for a company that a friend of mine worked for, and asked me to come out during their sales and marketing convention. And that was back in 2001, and that was probably the biggest crowd I had.
Yeah.
I almost passed out when I got on stage. But, it's just afforded me to do a lot of things, meet a lot of people, go a lot of places. But I think the thing it's really done is just provided me to give laughter to people.
Yeah, and that's a real gift, isn't it? That's a real gift. And
yeah.
So you've had some fun with that. You've been able to have a good, solid career in the corporate world, and doing comedy for all these years. And yet, as you said, you've had some great opportunities, and yet reality kind of slapped you in the face back in October of 2004. So why don't you just kind of take us to that part of the story, how you had to deal with some pretty harsh reality there?
Yeah. So my wife and I, we found out she was pregnant in May of '04, and then we got married in June of '04, and then in October of '04 I was diagnosed.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was crazy. I remember.
And then it couldn't have been too much after that. You had a child, right? Not too long after that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. He was
So,
he was born in
so,
January of '05.
so you had within whatever 8 or 9 months, you had
Yeah.
drama and trauma of almost every spectrum.
Yeah.
Pregnancy, get married,
Yeah.
cancer, new child. Wow.
Yeah. It was nuts. And
So what was
and I
going
remember,
what was going through your head then, Ryan? How were you processing all that kind of insane set of circumstances?
yeah, it was just a flurry of weird emotions, up and downs. I tried not to get too depressed. I didn't really know what I had until we did some more tests, and then we met with the oncologist. And I think when we met with him, he was so confident that really helped a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
I remember he walked into the room, and my wife's with me, and she's pregnant. And he kind of snapped back, asked a lot of questions, left, came back, and he said, "This is what you have. This is what we're going to do, and this is when we're going to start." And I'm like, "Okay, wow."
Wow.
And
So do you mind saying a little more, just a slight more detail about what kind of cancer you had and how serious was it, and a little bit about the treatment process?
yeah, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma,
Okay.
um, and I think I can't remember, stage 4, maybe 3 or 4.
Wow. Okay. Serious
Yeah,
matter. I mean, this is
yeah,
not, yes, this is a serious circumstance you were dealing with, right?
yeah, and yeah, the option back then, off the bat, was chemotherapy,
Yeah.
and we did 6 rounds of chemo every 3 months. The protocol was called CHOP R. I can't
Okay.
remember what all it was.
Yeah.
Prednisone was one of them.
Yeah.
Uh,
You kind of have a cocktail of different drugs that are
yeah,
administered to you, and some people react, handle it pretty well, and other people it really knocks them on their butt. And so how did you manage, the actual chemotherapy? How did it go for you?
it being that young at 38, it went fairly well. I remember my doctor saying, "You're going to lose your hair in 2 weeks, and these lumps are going to go away within a couple of days," and both were true. So that gave me some hope. I would say probably 2 or 3 days after the chemotherapy, it's when it really hit, and had flu-like symptoms and just couldn't do much. And then by the time I felt good, it was time to do chemotherapy again.
Yeah.
So, uh, and
That
this is
crazy
one of those things.
it's that crazy cycle a lot of people going through chemotherapy go through. They, you know, have a really bad time with it, feel a little better by the time back at it again. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it was just focusing on my wife and soon to be child, and uh, really listening to the doctor.
Right.
Uh, he gave me all kinds of to dos and not to dos, and one of them, he said, "If you're going to go out to eat, go out early, really early. I don't want you to be around people." And I
Okay.
asked him about doing stand up, and he's like, "No, there's no way." Uh, and I said, "Well, on the dinner thing, what if we go and there's people?" And he goes, "Oh, you could do that." I go, "Well, what happened to your patients that did?" And he's like, "Yeah, they're not around anymore."
Oh my gosh.
Okay, we'll go early.
That's a little dose of reality.
Yeah.
By early, did you mean like early in the day or early in the treatment cycle? Is that what
He
he
meant
mean?
early in the day, like go right at 5. If you can
Okay.
go out to dinner, but go right
So
at 5.
just try not to be around a whole lot of other people. Okay.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't get whatever bug was going around,
Right.
that kind of, okay. All
Right.
right.
Yeah, and
Good.
I had to take my temperature every night at 6, and if it was elevated, I'd have to go to the ER, no questions
Right.
asked.
Did you have any kind of sense back then, Ryan, of kind of your own mortality and that type of thing that you were dealing with that kind of thing?
Uh, I try not to think about that.
Right.
I just tried to think about getting through it and not get that big.
Yeah.
You
But
know,
at that time, you were still involved with comedy. It sounded like you had hit the pause button for a little bit there, but it sounded like that it was still on your mind
oh
that
yeah,
you wanted to get back you wanted to get back at it. Is that right?
I did. I definitely did. I missed it.
So tell me
The
about when you finally were able to get back into it, able to get before an audience again. Was it, I don't know, months or year or so before you were able to do that? Tell me about how that was to get back at it.
It was about I think 8 or 9 months, maybe a year before I could really get the clearance to go ahead and
Right.
do it. And it was a little shaky, being out that long.
Yeah.
But I kept running through jokes and kept thinking uh, about material and kind of
Right.
rehearsing in my head. So by the time I got back on stage, it didn't look like I was back to amateur status.
Right. So you'd been working on material that whole time. You were kind of sitting out as well. You were kind of writing and what have you.
Yeah, and I still to this day do cancer jokes in my act.
Yeah. Well, let's go with that for a second because I know that when what little stand up comedy I've done cancer related things, and so I'm just interested when people are doing that, as you have done. And so tell me about how that went when you do cancer related material in your acts. Just kind of tell me how it goes and about your experiences with that.
Uh, it usually goes dead quiet,
Okay. Uh, yeah, I know. Yeah.
uh, especially early on when I still my hair was still gone and I was a lot thinner from all the treatment, and so you do
Right.
jokes and I've had people come up to me like, "Are you really a cancer survivor?" And I'm like, "Why would I even make that up?" You
Yeah.
know.
Right.
And now
Uh,
I still do it today, and it's there's a little bit more laughter just
sure.
because I'm so far out. But those first couple of years, it was like it just fallen on deaf ears, and
But
I didn't care.
yeah. What also from our prior conversation, you said something to the effect of that you uh, still chose to, even though some of the material was not hitting, bombing, or whatever you want to say, you still chose to do it kind of for you. Is that right? Tell me a little bit, tell me a little bit about the kind of the psychological process of why you felt compelled to still do some of the cancer related material for yourself.
Because I found humor in a dark place,
Yeah.
and that was the way I could deal with it. Like there were funny things that I thought happened, and me talking about that on stage helped me kind of deal with it more, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's the way you were coping, and that's kind of what we deal with here on Cancer Comedy. Help people to cope. We like to call it cope with hope and humor, and kind of
Yeah.
the hope. The hope is the goal, but the humor is kind of how you do it. And
Yeah.
so I'm gonna put you on the spot here just a little bit. If you can come through, fine. If not, we'll move on. But do you remember any of the jokes or the stories that you told at that point, or even now, about cancer and your relationship to it, even if they bombed? But
Yeah. So one of the funniest stories is when I got diagnosed. Then you get staged, right?
yeah, oh
So
yeah,
they do the bone marrow and then the bone chip test. And I tell people, if you've never had a bone marrow test, it's probably the most painful test until right after that they do the bone chip.
yeah.
So I'm explaining how they do the bone chip. And the normal person, it took 3 vials to numb the area. For me, it took 6. I felt like Babar. And I'm on
Oh
the
gosh.
table on my stomach and I'm moving back and forth quite a bit. And I'm thinking, man, something's not right. And I look back at my doctor and he's broken out in a sweat. And I'm like, are you okay, doc? And he said, do you drink a lot of milk? And I'm like, that's true? And he's like, yeah, I should have told you to stop drinking milk 3 days ago.
Wow.
And I
Okay.
always just found that hilarious. The nurse was cracking up. I just,
So just basically, just for understand, the calcium in your bones was tougher to get. I don't know how to explain it
yeah,
really. It was tougher to get to your bones because of
yep,
calcium. Okay,
yep,
and
yeah.
so
Had I
therefore you
stopped
was.
drinking, yeah, had I stopped drinking milk 3 days earlier, it
So
would have.
some people they say quit you drinking alcohol or something like that. You were supposed to stop drinking milk, right? So
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
you missed your pure thing. But oh my gosh, that's I get it and it's funny in its own way. But I can see how you got to go really around the bend to get to a lot of people in that. But I think there's something to be said about the procedures that
Yeah,
cancer patients go through, whether it's needles or surgery or chemo or I'm a prostate cancer surgery guy, and so there was ramifications of that, sexually and so on that are all in the mix here. We all go through some things. I mean, I think part of what I've learned in my experiences doing a little bit of cancer related humor and what I've done in stand up is that you kind of still have to kind of discern a little bit based on your audience and what your own personal sensitivities are about kind of how far to go or what to say and kind of judge your audience. There was any kind of that uh, process for you to try to figure out, what was appropriate, what wasn't appropriate, and what to go for and what to not, that kind of thing.
you, I consider myself a clean comic, and
Right.
so by the time I get to the cancer material, I think I've already established a relationship with the crowd,
Yeah.
uh, and so I feel pretty good about diving into that at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there's been a few times where maybe that relationship hasn't developed, and at that, I remember a couple of times just not doing that material just
Right.
because I think, you know,
You kind of self edited on the spot, so to speak, that kind of
yeah,
thing. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, but I would say more often than not, I do it. It's now well received, and being so far out, I think people,
Oh.
I would hope, think, hey,
Yeah.
if this guy can make it, we can make it.
Well, I think it depends a little bit on the audience that you have, that kind of stuff as well. In terms of trying to read the room, and I'm sure you've got a lot more experience than me in that type of thing. And but I just think it is the discernment issue. I think is something that a lot of us who deal with this kind of therapeutic humor thing, which is what I kind of lean into, kind of have to kind of at least think about it a little bit. When's as not only as a professional comedian like yourself, but in certain settings. Like I'm a retired pastor, so when visiting people like in the hospital with cancer, had to be a little careful about what I said to whom and that kind of thing, and because I would tend to want to try to lighten things up, like somebody wired up to needles and IVs and everything, and say, "Hey, when are you going to do cartwheels or something like that?" And just some people would go over well, some people not so much, but
Yeah.
depending who was in that room. But I love the fact you've chosen, Ryan, to not let your cancer situation either to kind of push it out of the way completely, try to pretend like it's not there, and you've also haven't made it kind of kind of doom scroll type of thing, where you got a little dark humor here, and that's okay, but you've kind of integrated it with your act, and that's I think that's that's a good thing. Tell me a
No,
little bit
thank you.
about Tell me a little bit about your kind of philosophy and your approach to comedy. I know in our conversation you said I did the same thing. You watched a lot of Johnny Carson, late night guys. I was a big David Letterman fan as well. And then you would kind of maybe try to learn from that or repeat that or do something like that. Uh, what do you think you learned both in kind of those incredible comedians, late night comedians, and people you've been around in your career? I know you've like opened for some pretty big headliners. I know that. What you've kind of learned about that you've maybe applied not only to your career wise, but how to make some decisions. Kind of what we're talking about here. But what's right to put in, what's not right to put in.
Yeah, I think what I've learned is two things: timing, obviously, and confidence.
Okay.
I've worked with, I mean, watching Carson, watching Letterman. Despite Letterman's own self-deprecating humor,
Mm-hmm.
there's a confidence there. Carson had it
For sure.
a gazillion times over. And that's what I've learned working with so many headliners is just the confidence they have when they get up on stage. They expect to kill.
Yeah.
And I've worked with other comics who are tentative and oh man, I don't know about this crowd, blah, blah, blah. And I just had other guys like, I'm going up and I'm killing it.
Yeah.
And that's what I've really learned is just that, to have that confidence. And even if the joke doesn't work, move on and keep that confidence going anyway. That's the main thing.
Kind of if I'm understanding you correctly, kind of a go for it in the initial stages, and even if thing doesn't go quite right, just keep going forward, push through.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. Well, and yet there's another side of this that I think deserves some conversation with you and I. You mentioned that you're married and have children, and I know that when you deal with cancer or other life situations, you've got a family life to deal with, your marriage and your children and all that kind of thing. And you had to kind of balance that out with your comedy career and your corporate career as well. And was there any time where you had to really think about this in terms of your wife and your family? What am I putting them through as well? Anything along this line where you had to kind of be sensitive about those family matters?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, once we had our oldest, and I was able to perform, I was fortunate enough to be working almost every month at the club. It was great. Yeah. And then we had our second, and then my wife's like, I just can't have you going every month. I need help, and I can't have you doing that. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I totally get it, and that's fine. And so I did that. And then as they got older, I started to get back into it a little bit more. And then we didn't, trying to not talk about cancer in front of the kids. We're trying to be cognizant about that because obviously they were young.
Sure.
And so we always tried to be careful about what we were talking about. And now they're at the point where we can talk about it and they ask about it if they want. But there was a time there where we just had to kind of keep it on the down low.
Sure.
The interesting thing is our son, the oldest, got RSVP, and then we had to take him to the hospital, and then I got sick, so we took him home, and then I went into the hospital.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
So we mentioned all the traumas you had and having a kid sick, an infant especially. That's pretty big right there. Goodness.
Yeah, it was crazy. I tell you the other story. I almost had to have open heart surgery. They put the port. I would think they would measure where the port stops in relation to your heart, and they don't. They just put it in there. As a result, my heart was beating into the tip of the port.
Oh my gosh!
And I developed a clot. And my oncologist thought it was a clot. The cardiologist thought it was a tumor. Jeez. And these guys were arguing for a week.
Oh man!
And
I've heard these. Unfortunately, I've heard these types of stories before, where doctors are arguing over, and you're kind of in the middle of it, and sometimes you're literally in the middle of it. I've seen it where one guy's on one side of the bed, one guy's on the other, and you're in the middle, and they're arguing about your treatment. I don't know if that's the case for you, but I've seen that happen.
You're spot on. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And an hour before I was supposed to go under, the cardiologist comes into my room and says, I'm gonna buy into this clot theory and put you on Coumadin. And I'm gonna have you come back in a month. And if that is the same size or bigger, I'm going in and I'm gonna rip that out.
Oh my gosh.
And I went back and it was almost gone at that point.
Wow.
So that was just insane. And this is the period where it was such a stress on my wife, obviously.
Right.
And, she is incredible was incredible, still is incredible. You know,
That's awesome.
she stuck with me and stuck through it. And, you know, I just feel like as a couple, we're stronger than maybe most couples. I don't want to brag, but that kind of bond,
Well, that's all right.
it's hard to
If you're
break.
gonna brag about something, brag about your marriage, man. That's good.
Yeah.
Well,
It was crazy times.
well,
And,
tell me about how that relationship with your wife and how you kind of sorted it out with your kids and all these things happening to you. What, if anything, did that teach you about hope in the midst of all these pretty significant stressors in your life?
yeah, I think it gave me a lot of confidence in the medical profession.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had doctors and nurses that were just golden, and that gave me a lot of confidence. Uh, I think the way my wife and I navigated through it and talked about it, the hopes and the fears and the what ifs and all
Yeah.
that, you know, I think it just strengthened us. But I definitely felt hopeful just from the medical profession I was dealing with. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people, you know, you can go on and on about
Sure. Yeah.
stories, but
Right. Well,
I was, it
it
was
sounded like
great.
they gave that the hope that they had in you, some confidence in your treatment procedures was good. And you mentioned about your wife and your family being supportive, and I'm a big believer of the emotional connection with other people as well comes into play. I'm kind of curious about how the comedy community or your work, even your corporate work community, how they responded. You know, were they helpful? Was it just a non-factor, apathetical? How did both those communities react to your pretty significant health crisis here?
You know, it's interesting. A lot of people kind of went away during
Hmm.
that period. And
Yeah,
I think because I was 38, it's pretty young to hear the C word.
yeah,
And so I think a lot of my friends didn't know what to do, were kind of freaked out that that even happened. And so it our social group dwindled.
okay,
And there was some anger with that. And then once I was done with chemo and as time passed, then that's kind of what I figured out is that people just didn't know how to deal with it.
yeah. Well,
And, you know,
it's a
you
it's
just
a
move
it's
on.
a it's a scary thing, and I think that's part of what we work on in our podcast is trying to give some tools to people, both those who are and we like to say people impacted by cancer is not only the persons like you and me who have cancer, but the family members and others, and try to get some tools on how to we call it cope with hope, helping people be a coping organism, not just coping mechanism. A coping mechanism is kind of something you bring from the outside, whether it's whatever, buying a new car or drinking or whatever it would be, to kind of cope with it that way artificially.
Yeah.
But we try to talk about kind of internal life and relationships and that kind of thing. And we also sometimes talk about the spiritual life and that kind of thing. So I just want to ask you, and if you're not comfortable with it, fine, that's okay. But any aspect of a spiritual element involved with all this whole process for you?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm not particularly religious, but I can tell you how many people said they were praying
Mm-hmm.
for us. And you hear that over and over and over again. And it just felt like it resonated. Like
Yeah.
uh, it just did something and gave me a little bit more hope and a little bit more light at the end of the tunnel, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
It kind of goes into the mix. I believe there's kind of a process for people to kind of we call it healing with hope and humor, but and the connection with other people and the thinking strategically and your health related things, but also the connection with a higher power in some form or another is a part of a healing process as well. And certainly, but I was interested in another thing we mentioned in our prior conversation here, Ryan. Um, it kind of goes back to some of the family stuff we mentioned. We talked about a minute ago. You mentioned that you have a daughter, and I think there was maybe some a part of the story when we talked about before. There was even some question whether you'd be able to have children, something like that, after your son. I
Yeah.
don't know if I can't remember that exactly what we talked about. But that's kind of a part in the mix too. But when she did come along, that she is as she part of your life, she asked you basically to not include her in your comedy. So I don't know. Just unpack that whole situation for me a little bit. How you navigate that? Because I happen to be the father of a daughter who's pretty sensitive, and now I'm the grandfather of two daughters who are. Well, one's a comic relief person, and one's very sensitive, that kind of thing. I think the one who's the comic relief would love it, and the sensitive one would go, no way, Grandpa. But
Yeah.
but just unpack it a little bit about how you kind of try to honor your daughter, but do some things as well.
Yeah. It's funny. So when before I started chemo, the doctor said you're going to be sterile, and there's a chance that you won't be able to have kids again. And I'm like, well, okay, we have one, and he's healthy, and we tried, and it just wasn't happening. And I think we both agreed, let's just move on, not worry about it. And then boom, she gets pregnant. And then Aaron was born in '08. And probably in the last 3 or 4 years, she's made it very clear. I don't, no talking about me on stage. No talking about me. And I do some jokes about my son. I didn't really give him a choice. I just did them.
There you go.
But yeah, she's great. She's funny. She's witty. She's fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't. There's so many great stories I could do, but I'm not allowed. So I respect that.
Well, you respect that. And this kind of goes back to some of our earlier conversation about where do you learn how to draw the line, and what price do you pay if you go over the line? And I'm sure you wouldn't want to jeopardize your relationship with your daughter, by going over that line. But what have you kind of learned about all that kind of thing, about this line? This place to go when you do your comedy?
Yeah, it's funny. A long time ago, I auditioned at a comedy club in Louisville, and I had a couple of guys come up to me, and they said, "Man, you are quick, dark, and edgy, and you should move to Boston."
Wow. Okay, that's That's an interesting take on things. Yeah, quick, dark, and edgy. You that sounds like it should be a T-shirt or a tattoo or something. I don't know.
Yeah, something. Yeah. And so I don't know. I think I'm quick. Maybe back then I was a little dark and edgy, but not so much anymore. But the line, that's interesting. It's so much different now because of all these different ways to watch comedy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, and you can go on and on and on.
Sure.
And there are comics out there that are, still dirty. There's, the ones that are still squeaky clean.
Right.
I think when you're performing, you could kind of tell where the audience is. Are they sober? Are they a little loopy? Can I get away with this? Maybe you do a little test joke to see where they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But
I just kind of wonder how you handle that kind of thing, because then one of the things you also do, Ryan, I think is really cool. You have done some volunteer work for Leukemia Lymphoma Society, and I know you mentioned that your wife's involved with some cancer-related groups. Why are you doing that? How's it going? Tell me a little bit about that experience of working with these cancer-related groups.
Yeah. So and this is how I found you, is my wife is the one who found.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think on Facebook. The volunteering is great. I'm a First Connection volunteer with Leukemia Lymphoma Society, now Blood Cancer United. And when somebody has a similar diagnosis, I get contacted and I talk to them about what to expect.
All right. Excellent.
And that's been really rewarding because you could hear, obviously, the fear and the unknown in their voice. And I talk them through. We've done some work with Light the Night. I was a Man of the Year candidate a couple of different times.
Okay.
It's
awesome.
It's just rewarding to try to give back and try to help people and let them know.
It sounds like you're involved with something helping other people that maybe I'm not sure if it was or was not afforded to you. You said you had your family with you, but was anything like this afforded to you when you were going through this?
We didn't really connect with LLS until maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 months into it. And then when we did, they were great. Um, I just wish we would have known about it
Sure,
sooner. But
sure.
yeah, they've just been a great organization and very supportive.
Well, Ryan, you've mentioned that you incorporate your cancer story into your comedy act. I'm just curious. When you do that, if you see, or you mentioned you've had some kind of negative reactions, but if you ever had anybody come up to you after the show or anything along this line to say, thank you for sharing this, it's important to me, anything along or helpful, anything along that line that's come to your way.
Yeah, it's happened a few times where people will come up to me and ask again, are you really a cancer survivor? I am, and then they'll say that they are as well, and it might not be the exact type, but it's still the common bond. It's happened a few times, and that's been really nice. It's really nice of them to come up and say something and kind of share some stories and
Yeah, yeah,
have a confidence level, and then
yeah. Well, that's
move
awesome.
on.
Well, you made a
Yeah,
connection. You made a connection with
yeah,
somebody, and the fact is, cancer in one form or another impacts almost everybody, whether they admit it or not. They either have themselves or a family member or a coworker or somebody in their life who's dealing with it, and
yep,
that's a deal there. Which kind of leads
yep.
me to I just kind of bringing this around our conversation around just a couple of things here before we conclude, and that is. Has cancer ever shown up in your act in some way that kind of surprised you? What I mean by that, or a kind of a joke that came out of nowhere, or some experience that you decided to share that maybe you thought might have been a private thing? Is it any kind of an aha moment or surprise moment that's kind of coming out of your experience?
From the cancer specifically, or just in
Well,
general?
I'll give you the leeway. I'm kind of thinking about the cancer, but I just wonder if there's, you know, like in the middle of an act where just you kind of had, you got your set things you're going to say, but something comes to you kind of out of the moment that that you kind of went for it, that maybe even surprised you a little bit.
I mean, I can't really think of anything specific. I will tell you, I do a lot of crowd work,
Oh, you do? Okay.
and yeah, and that's always a lot of fun. And then things come out of that
Sure.
usually
Okay.
go well. I
Right.
think on the act, there's been a few times where I'll do a punchline that might not work, and then I'll follow up with something, and then I get a big laugh out of that, and trying to remember that for the next
Yeah.
time if that
There you go.
happens. But yeah,
Well,
there's a lot of moments like that where uh,
well,
you,
let,
you say
let,
something.
let me ask you just one or two other things, and that has to do with, let's just say there's someone in life who either you encounter either through your professional career or just personally who has some sort of a diagnosis in life, cancer or some other bad adversity. It could be a bankruptcy, a divorce, any number of things, but going through something bad. But what have you some lessons you've learned out of your career and out of your life experience, especially people going through that? I call it the insane period where you kind of just, go on, your mind goes 100 places. But what would you say to somebody going through that, how they might be able to get through it, even with a little bit of humor in their life? What would you tell them how they can have some coping skills?
I think that the most important thing for me was to slow down, and it's a cliche, but it is one day at a time.
Yeah.
It really is. If you start thinking about all these things, it's going to be overwhelming, and then you're just going to go down a depression.
Yeah.
It's really wake up, get through the day, be positive, and just keep that going.
There
Things are going to happen, negative things. What I like to say is I don't believe in bad days. I just believe in bad moments.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
So that's really the most important thing is
Well, if you
be
don't believe
open,
in,
be honest.
I think you see a lot of people kind of go down a doom scroll or a spiral, and you got to break out of that, and you got to be very
Yeah,
intentional about that. And I think were you thinking about humor? And the most comedians I've been around, or humorists, or writers, things like that, are kind of got their, they're kind of got their antenna up all the time about what they can be thinking about and how to apply it to their art. And I think that's part of what you're doing there. All right, just to where you, I guess, got to ask you, where do you get the name the Nutty Irishman, man? And then tell us a little bit of what people can expect from the Nutty Irishman if they track down one of your shows. How'd you get that name?
Well, I think a friend of mine came up with that. He and his wife are advertising duo. She does my website. He came up with my logo, and I've had that Nutty Irishman for quite a while. I'm not sure that was the original idea, but there were other sites taken, so we came out on that. I think when you come to a show, it's going to be high energy, mostly clean. I talk about a lot of different subjects, marriage, divorce, obviously the cancer, observational. Do, like I said, a lot of crowd work. I've been at it for a long time, and I feel like I'm fairly polished, and so I think you'd get your money's worth.
Well, I know on your website you've got a lot of examples, YouTube videos and whatnot of your work, and you've mentioned some of the headliners you've worked with, Henry Chow and some others. I noticed that, and so they're going to see a professional show and they're going to have a good time. And you said mostly clean, and that's what people can expect there. And so, are you doing mainly? I know you're based out of Sacramento, California. Is it mainly around there, or do you travel a bit in what you do?
It's mostly in Northern California.
Yeah. So if people in that neighborhood look you up. And in any case, the website is Nutty Irishman. That is nutty-irishman.com. And we'll put all of this in our show notes at cancerandcomedy.com. And it's been a delight to have you with us. His name is Ryan McCormick, the Nutty Irishman. Now, if you want to catch him live and find out more about him, as we said, the nutty-irishman.com. And we thank you for being our guest here today on the Cancer and Comedy Podcast. And he just said it a minute ago. Ryan said, kind of look for the brighter side of life. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for being our guest today on Cancer and Comedy, Ryan.